Hola guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Roxanne. If it's your first time here, then welcome. Today I want to talk to you guys about the next 5 books that I have read recently. First is The Witches of New York by Amy Mackay. This is a historical fiction fantasy book that takes place in late 19th century New York City. There is this tea shop that is owned by these 2 witches named Adelaide Tom and Eleanor St. Clair. And Adelaide, one of the witches, puts out in the local newspaper an ad for an assistant. Eleanor has helped her a lot, and so she feels like she wants to pass that along to another young woman. And so there is this young girl named Beatrice who comes to the shop, and it is unbeknownst to her that she also has magical abilities, and she begins to experience a lot of strange things that begin to happen when she arrives at the tea shop. And slowly Adelaide and Eleanor help her to come into her powers, to understand what being a witch means, to understand everything that has been going on recently and everything that's gone on in her life. And this isn't really a plot-driven novel. It's more about the three main characters and their friendship, which I did really enjoy that. But overall, I felt like this book was a bit of a disappointment. I really think that this has the qualities to make a very strong, really awesome female friendship-driven fantasy book about witches in New York, but it fell very flat. It felt like this is the beginning of something, but it never really got to its potential. As far as I know, and as far as many people know on Goodreads and online, this is a standalone book, but there's a lot of things that remain unresolved. The 3 witches aren't really hiding per se. They can meet with people and tell them what they can do, and the teas that they sell sort of have these magical abilities that help the people that buy them. So it's not really so much that they're hiding, but they aren't also parading around their abilities, because there are very religious, very conservative people that do not want them to be witches and to exist, and do not want witchcraft to exist. And so that creates an issue, and that's sort of the main climax of the book. But there are other things at play that never really get resolved. There are characters that you kind of don't know what's going to happen with them or to them, and this is almost like the beginning of a series, but it doesn't seem like it's going to become that, and so it just ultimately ended up falling flat. I do like the female friendship aspect of it, and I like the witchcraft aspect of it, though I feel like that could have been more grand as well and more developed. One of the main characters, Eleanor, is a queer woman, which is awesome. But like I said, this just had a lot of really cool components that never really came together to make something magical. Then it was a reread for me. I read the Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, which is the 4th book in the Harry Potter series, and this was my first Harry Potter audio book. I have heard that the British edition of the audiobooks are better. The one that I heard was very nice, and I enjoyed it. I didn't like Hermione's voice, which someone tweeted me, and I agree. I didn't like the way that he did Hermione's voice. It was very whiny, which I didn't like, but overall it felt very comforting and very wonderful, like Harry Potter always does. And so I loved this. I love this book. I love this series, and there's not really anything new I can say about it except that I loved it. Then I read listened to The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. I hadn't hauled this because I actually purchased it recently after having finished the audiobook. I loved it so much that I went and I got it. This is a YA story told entirely in verse, and if you can get your hands on the audiobook or your local library has it, then I definitely recommend reading it that way. Acevedo is a former slam poetry champ, and so obviously she is awesome at narrating her own book, and so I definitely recommend it. I think it was very powerful to experience it in that way. And this is about a young Dominican girl living in Harlem who finds herself through poetry. It's about a young girl coming into her own, and through her story we get to explore different aspects of the Latin American culture, especially about the expectations that family has for you, about how different her way of thinking from her parents can be. Her parents are much more traditional and religious, and how that clashes with her way of thinking. And you discuss how difficult it still is to be a queer teen in Latinx families, the differences and expectations and the double standards that we have for girls and for boys, something that I have so many issues with, as having experienced so much of it myself. And I thought this was just beautiful. It doesn't mirror my experience per se, but it does mirror the experiences of so many friends of mine who are Dominican, and it felt beautiful, and it felt like reading about a friend of mine. And I thought that was really, really awesome, and I definitely recommend it. Like I said, as soon as I finished it, I went ahead and I bought it. It is a very, very quick read if you want to read it, because obviously everything is told in verse, so you will be done with it very quickly. But even though it's short, it doesn't feel like it's missing anything. It feels like a very powerful, complete story, and I definitely recommend it. Then I read a Jane Austen that I think I read when I was younger, but I didn't remember anything about it, and it is Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. It is Jane Austen's sort of satirical take on the Gothic novel, and it does feel very lighthearted, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it. It's about a young girl named Catherine and her first experience into coming into society and making friends and falling in love, and what all that means and how to navigate that world. And I enjoyed the reading experience. I love Jane Austen's writing and wit and humor that's always present, and that's always very enjoyable to read. I didn't connect with Catherine like I have with other Austen heroines, but overall I did enjoy this. This was a lighthearted, fun, fast read, and I recommend it, and I'm glad I read it, and I'm glad that I will have it as part of my collection of Jane Austen books, because I did enjoy it. It wasn't my favorite by any means, but it was fun and lighthearted, which was kind of what I was expecting going into it, though I was a little disappointed that I wasn't really able to connect and care for Catherine as much as I did for obviously Elizabeth or Emma or something like that. Then a book that I loved and I knew that I was gonna love, but it just took me forever to get to it, and it is Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Aang. This is a book about the death of a young Chinese American girl and the toll it takes on her family and everything that leads up to her death. And this is it feels very, very heavy when you're reading it. I tweeted that I was going to work and I just felt very heavy. I felt like there was a shadow over me, and then I remembered that I had been reading this book and that I started to feel that as I was reading it. And I think that speaks volumes of how atmospheric this book is, while simultaneously being very subtle in its mystery and how it gets you to feel that heaviness, to feel that shadow, and you feel that loss that the family is feeling and that confusion that the family feels. It alternates perspective, and it alternates sort of timelines. You go back and forth from the present and then the past, and then even farther back to when the parents met and their youth. And Celeste Ng is able to beautifully interweave through the story commentary on what it's like to be an immigrant, the expectations of the family, and how desperate you become to live up to the expectations of your parents, especially when they're immigrants and you feel like they've given up so much for you, and you desperately don't want to let them down, and you want to make a better life for your kids, so much so that you almost miss what's right in front of you and the family that you have and what they need to feel loved and cared for, because you're so focused on that goal. In the 1970s and in a small town in Ohio, and the effects that sexism has and what a toll that can take on the life of a woman who has these amazing dreams that she wishes to achieve, but she simultaneously tries to achieve them, but then it doesn't visualize them, and it is still difficult for her to visualize that future for herself. The mom in this story wants to become a doctor, but whenever doctors are spoken of, she automatically thinks of them as men, and it's this interesting dichotomy of something that she is wanting to achieve, but something that she almost can't visualize simultaneously. And that's very interesting and very powerful statement to make. And I think this was everything that I wanted it to be. It is beautiful. It is beautifully written. It is heartbreaking. I felt very emotional while reading this, and if you can get your hands on it and read it, then please by all means do. And if her second book is anything like this one, then I'm sure I will love it. She may become a new favorite author of mine. I really enjoyed this. I think it definitely lives up to all of the hype, and just subtle is really the best word that I can think about it. Everything about this book is very subtle. Its atmosphere, the themes, everything just sort of creeps up on you, and once you get to the end, you're just kind of like, holy shit, like that was a lot in a short book. And I almost didn't feel it as I was experiencing it, but once you're done, it all kind of just weighs on you very heavily, and I thought it was great. So those are the books that I have recently read and my thoughts on them. If you've read any of them, let me know what you think. Let me know if you want to read any of them now that you've heard me talk about them. Let me know what you've recently been reading. As always, thank you for watching and for listening. I love you guys.